if last night was the greatest party of the summer, then I guess this is the hangover? Maybe? Let's find out what you guys asked the Phoenix. What's going on, everybody? It's your buddy, it's your pal Spaz Phoenix, the YWC Reality Check, and this is your August post-SummerSlam edition of Ask the Phoenix. I know, I keep saying I'm going to tie these Q&As to the Big 4/Big 5 pay-per-views, and it's going to be like a precursor to the pay-per-view, and it hasn't happened a whole bunch now because timing being what it is, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. There's Evolution going on, there's the Mae Young Classic 2, there's NXT, etc., etc. And I mean, we had to do the previews as well. Sorry, guys. Face is itchy. You guys don't need to see that. But yeah, so this should have been done before WrestleMania weekend, and it just wasn't. Also, real life got in the way, so that was a thing. Also, I'm going to put it out to you guys. I love doing the Q&As. I really do. The usual suspects that come out are great. Can't say enough how much I appreciate you guys. But the past 3 Q&As, I've been answering a buttload of questions, but only from 2 or 3 people. So I'm going to be doing the Q&A pre or post Survivor Series, and judging, because that'll be the last one of the year, judging on that will sort of decide whether this series goes on into 2019. Now, that's not me coming up here being angry, being whatever. If the response is what it is, then maybe I have to think about doing something else instead. I'll still find a way to interact with you guys. It'll still be a lot of fun, but maybe it'll be more... I mean, I've done various things before. I've done the whole Name Your Star thing from years ago, if you guys remember that. I've done the sort of the mini weekly Q&As that I used to do. There might be something else. So if that's not the case, if you guys do want this to continue, make it known in the comment section. Even if you don't have any questions, if you're just somebody that watches the Q&A because that's something you like to watch, let me know down in the box below, because the response has sort of steadily gone down. So I like doing it, but I'm only going to do it if it's something you guys want to see, if that makes sense. Speaking of the usual suspects, if you didn't watch the preview for SummerSlam, for TakeOver, I recently ticked over to 800 videos. I believe this is now 802. So big shout out and thanks to everybody that's ever been on this channel, from my current co-hosts Kristen and Guapo, who are great, to former co-hosts like OK Fabe, even Preston and Vocal Aggression, and Orton Storm and Steffi Sunshine. Thank you to all of you guys who have contributed to this channel. Obviously, Salvador Salcido, who does all the graphics for this channel. Great guy. If you want graphics, go talk to him. And thank you to everybody that participates. All the usual suspects. People I'm going to mention today. People that take part in the pay-per-view pick'em. Obviously, pay-per-view pick'em results for TakeOver and SummerSlam I'm going to discuss this Wednesday in the NXT review. But I'm thinking of the Zohans, the strifenineteens, the Mizark 10s, the Cheney 815s, all of them. I mean, Mike S., you guys know who you are. You guys that contribute and participate with this channel, you guys know who you are. And even if I do end up changing the Q&A to something else, I do hope you guys come along for the ride and keep participating, because those are the scenarios where you guys help make this channel what it is. So really thanks a lot to you guys. I mean, the next big milestone will be 900 and then 1,000. I hope we can get our my subs a little bit farther up than what they are right now by then. If this is your first time watching the Q&A, it's pretty goddamn simple. If you got questions you want answered in the next Q&A, which will be around Survivor Series, throw them down in the box below. I used to limit the number of questions you could ask. I don't do that anymore, but please don't kill me with 100 questions just for the sake of saying you asked me 100 questions. And we're off to the races. Speaking of the usual suspects, the Zohan says, which Undertaker loss is more embarrassing, the Great Khali or Vladimir Kozlov? Now, this is a weird question, and I know that's my reaction to a lot of questions, especially the ones that Zohan sends, because they're usually in great detail, and today is no exception. You can't really judge either, because you can see the Great Khali, kayfabe-wise, is like a kayfabe Big Show, in the sense that if the WWE storyteller spoke to you, he's the indestructible force. He is the brick wall. So whether or not they would go forward with that or not was yet to be seen. Vladimir Kozlov was just a new guy that showed a bit of promise, and you want to give him that little step up, that little jump in the first little bit of his run. Now, It's different if you look at it after the fact. I mean, Great Khali went on to become a SmackDown World Heavyweight Champion, whereas Vladimir Kozlov went on to do comedy sketches with Santino Marella. Now, let me be clear. I want to specify this. There's nothing wrong with being a comedy wrestler. There really isn't. Look at the New Day right now. It fills a role. It's they bring levity to a lot of shows that have a whole bunch of really, you know, bare knuckle serious fights. You need that bit of levity to let you up in the match between, or sorry, in the pay-per-view between the matches. So being a comedy wrestler is not a bad thing, contrary to what other people will tell you. But being a comedy wrestler is not the same as going on to become World Heavyweight Champion. So I say, in retrospect, I would say the loss to Vladimir Kozlov. And I mean, also, WWE does like to talk about size, so they will tell you that being beaten by a smaller guy is more embarrassing. That is kind of bullshit, as we know. But I gotta say Vladimir Kozlov, but through very mischievous means of logic is how I got to that result. Where does SummerSlam 2002 rank in your overall SummerSlam rankings? Now, I'm not going to sit here and rank all the SummerSlams because I'm just not. But he says in bold letters, here's a quick refresher as I know how you are with dates. Zohan, thanks, buddy. I really do appreciate that. I am terrible with dates. If you guys ask me about a specific date or a specific event that happened on a specific date, you gotta give me some context, because I will remember the event or the incident, but I'm not going to be able to tell you that that took place on March 22nd, 2001. I'm not that kind of fan. I don't have that kind of file-of-facts brain. It doesn't work like that. Quick refresher as to what was happening on that show. Lesnar versus Rock, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels, and Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle. Now, let's run down those three matches you just talked about. Lesnar versus Rock. Now, this is the very beginning of the dominance of Brock Lesnar, and The Rock made him look like $1 million. Shawn Michaels and Triple H in a street fight was sort of a transformative match, and Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle was a Rey Mysterio match that I actually gave a shit about. So fair play to all three of them. It's got to rank sort of maybe top five. Top five. I mean, where's that pay-per-view where Shawn Michaels oversold everything for Hulk Hogan because he didn't want to be in the match? Now flip that script and see what Shawn Michaels can do when he gives a shit about the match that he's in, and the match between him and Triple H was brutal. What do you think Enzo Amore would have done at WrestleMania 34 if his release in late January never occurred? Oh, you mean if he didn't get, like, super screwed by the Me Too movement? I could have seen him, honestly, as much as people don't want to hear this, I could have seen him in sort of the host role, like when we saw New Day host WrestleMania, when we saw The Miz in his early days host not SummerSlam, SmackDown. I could have seen him in some kind of host role because nobody liked him in the ring, but I will say that everybody found him entertaining on the mic. If you need a proof of that, take a look at when Enzo and Cass debuted on Raw after WrestleMania, when they interrupted the Dudley Boys and they were over as shit. Go back. I listened to it the other day because somebody in a completely different conversation said you need to go back and check it out. Look how over they were. Enzo was over as fuck. He did the whole opening spiel, kind of like Road Dogg. On the mic, he was over as hell. They could have booked him as a manager of Cass, and I think that would have done well for both guys. I think he would have been a host role. Also, something I was talking about on Twitter last night during the SummerSlam, it's funny to think, because everybody says, oh, isn't it so funny to think that Enzo, Cass, and Carmella came up and Carmella's the only one left? No, here's the real funny thing about that. You had that little triumvirate in NXT. They were a trio and they were over as fuck. They split and all three of them went heel. So they could have gotten, if Cass hadn't been an idiot and if the Me Too movement hadn't screwed Enzo Amore, they could have been a nice, cool heel faction. You could have had the three of them taking on English, Rusev, and Lana, for example, or the Usos and Trash Bag. Like, that could have been a thing that we all saw, but, you know, the world is not a fair place, so we didn't get that. Yeah, long story short, I would have had him host. I would have had him just cutting ridiculous promos, either on stage or in the back between matches. It would have been good. Who had a worse SmackDown World title run? Jack Swagger as World Heavyweight Champion in 2010, or Jinder Mahal as WWE World Heavyweight Champion in 2017? The worst one was Jack Swagger, because the only thing worse than a star that we hate is a star that we don't care about. They threw the thing on Jack Swagger, and he, for as long as he held it, it felt transitional. It's like, okay, he's holding on to somebody, sorry, he's holding on to that belt before somebody comes along and takes it. That's it. Jinder Mahal, people weren't that passive about it. People freaked out when he became the #1 contender. They freaked out that he got a title match on a pay-per-view, and they freaked out that he was the champion. He wound people up, which, as much as you people might hate to hear it, that is what a heel is supposed to do. Look at Miz. Look at Alexa Bliss. Look at... I'm sorry, those are my people, so they're the first two that come to mind. But, you know, people say, oh, well, Alexa Bliss isn't putting on 5-star classics. Well, if Alexa Bliss put on a 5-star classic, you'd be cheering her, and that wouldn't make her a good heel, would it? Look at any high flyer that turns heel and how much they downgrade their high flying stuff because they're not supposed to be cheered. Jinder Mahal, although when they came to Canada and he was competing in dark matches, the Toronto crowd was cheering the fuck out of Jinder Mahal. But that's more because he's our hometown guy rather than anything else. Jinder Mahal, for what they needed him to do, did great. Jack Swagger was pretty fucking useless, and all he did was face, you know, who did he face? Alberto, and they just did the Canada-Mexico thing, and the fact that I can't remember any of it, it tells you the story, doesn't it? If Undertaker did a shoot interview, what 3 events in his career would you like him to discuss? Jesus Christ. I'm going to say Paul Bearer, but I'm going to sort of put Paul Bearer over here because that's a real-life thing. I would have wanted him to discuss the Ministry. I would have wanted him to discuss the American Badass gimmick, and I would have wanted to hear his thoughts on the End of the Era match with Shawn Michaels and Triple H at WrestleMania in the cage. That would have been... Okay, the last one is kind of weird because they're going to fight again, so that match wasn't the End of the Era, but that was a very special match for those 3 guys and for the fans, and... You know, it's one of those times that they put a tag like End of an Era on a match, and it actually does fit. So yeah, the Ministry, the American Badass thing, and the End of the Era match, and sort of separately in a bubble, I would have loved to hear his overall thoughts on not only his time with Paul Bearer, but the passing of Paul Bearer and how they used that into the storyline with CM Punk, who was fucking brilliant, pouring the ashes out of the urn and all that. Do you believe Brock Lesnar versus Triple H would have happened at WrestleMania 21 if Lesnar hadn't quit? Probably. If so, what would Batista have done instead? I think they would have come around eventually to a Batista versus Randy Orton match. I don't remember what Randy Orton was doing that year because, you know, me and dates and stuff. But if Brock Lesnar and Triple H happened, a good undercard match to that would have been Batista versus Orton. Do you believe Brock Lesnar's departure in any way aided in Batista's rise to main event stature? I think a big presence like Brock Lesnar opened up the card to a lot of people. Anytime somebody leaves, they leave a big open space for somebody who's left. I mean, would Triple H have run up the ranks as much as he had if Austin and Rock were still around? Probably not. Would he have deserved to? Yes. It's like people say Randy Savage could have run the company if he wasn't born in the same era as Hogan. I mean, those are things. So Brock Lesnar leaving... it opened up the entire card to everybody, Batista definitely being one of the big names in that bunch. If WWE had access to the exact same WCW talent as they did in the original Invasion storyline, except for one extra former WWE superstar, who would you sign? It's Sting, isn't it? It really is Sting. And how would they debut and what would their role have been? I think right at the Invasion pay-per-view, the very first pay-per-view of the Invasion, you have Sting just drop from the rafters with his bat, call out Undertaker. I'm going to say this more than once, I think. I've always said that I'm glad they didn't do Sting versus Undertaker. For this reason. Because when WCW was a thing, we saw Sting, we saw Undertaker back in his prime, and we said, oh, that's the match we wanted to do. We all made an image in our heads of what we thought Sting and Undertaker would have been. 10 years later, we would have been comparing what we actually got to that image we had in our head, and we couldn't help but be disappointed. That being said, they would have had to do it. Sorry guys, my camera's doing a thing. Hold on one second. And we're back. Sorry guys, the wonders of technology do strike again. Anyways, I was talking about Undertaker and Sting. As I say, as much as I didn't want to see it, I do acknowledge that because of the characters they were and because of what they meant to their respective companies, they would have had to do Undertaker versus Undertaker versus Sting at some point. Now, thoughts on Paige's debut. Paige's debut was fucking brilliant because it had all the elements. You had AJ Lee, who was the super cocky heel, obviously underestimating her opponent, mocking not even her opponent, mocking just this girl that came to talk to her. Paige with that quintessential just happy to be there, pure Snow White babyface. AJ Lee's, bravado getting the best of her, Paige getting the roll up and getting the win. We loved Paige. We loved Paige in NXT. I think when they first established the NXT Women's Championship, the final match between Paige and Emma was still, you could still rank it up there now with some of the best matches of the early, women's revolution, whatever you want to call it. I think it's really, really good. Which reality show do you prefer in 2005? The $1 Million Tough Enough on SmackDown or the Diva Search on Raw? Neither. They were both bullshit. WWE needs to get over this game show stick that they had at the time, and Triple H got it. Triple H took one look at NXT and the game show nature of that, turned it into a proper fucking brand, and we figured out that the way to introduce new talent is through these no-frills tournaments, like the UK tournament, like the CWC, like the Mae Young Classic, which we're just about to go into again. You want to get new wrestlers over to the crowd, let them wrestle. Don't have Titus O'Neil doing laps around the ring carrying a beer keg, or don't have them doing obstacle courses and promo things. Remember in one of the Diva searches they had to hit on Kamala? Let's just remember that was a thing for a second. Now, take that and compare it to the Mae Young Classic, where yes, Kairi Sane won, but we got a bunch of awesome wrestlers out of that. We got the Dakota Kais, who's like a super over babyface in NXT right now. We got Shayna Baszler, who's the no longer the NXT champion, but I still think of her as the NXT champion. We got Toni Storm, who we were so clamoring for. She's back this year. So there was Serena Deeb, who we hadn't seen in a long ass time. Now compare that to the stupid game show shit. Now, I will say, coming out of the original stupid game show shit, you did have wrestlers like AJ Lee and Caitlyn, who's coming back in the Mae Young Classic. So there were some winners that they got out of that, but it really wasn't the way to do it, was it? Now, where are we going? Lost my place. Considering he worked for both ECW and WCW, would you have wanted to see Chris Jericho jump during the Alliance during the 2001 Invasion? No. Jericho served a very cool purpose during the Invasion because it was a WWE show, so we were all constantly on WWE's side. Whoever was watching the Invasion was WWE fans watching a WWE product who, for all intents and purposes, may not have ever seen any ECW or WCW. You needed somebody like Jericho who had been to both places, and you saw him continuously in backstage segments and whatever, talking about how, WCW is crazy, the inmates ran the asylum, ECW had one singular psychopath running that entire place, and that was Paul Heyman. They needed somebody on their team that could drive home to them the threat of ECW and WCW. I think placing him there was perfect. Which potential two opponents would you have liked to see Undertaker face at WrestleMania 32, keeping in mind that both were injured at the time? Sting or John Cena? John Cena, you wouldn't have had to stick in that year because we knew we were going to get it eventually. And we got it. We got it this year, actually. Sting, please see my previous statement. We were going to get Sting versus Undertaker at some point if everybody had their way. I don't want to see it, but I also acknowledge that WWE would have had to do it. So I would say Sting, but, for reasons. Would it have been a Hell in the Cell? Probably not. The Undertaker never won the Intercontinental Championship. If you would put the belt on him at any point in his career, what would it have been? I don't think you do. I think he went from being a main event champion to an attraction and back again. I don't think there was ever a point in his career where he was considered a mid-carder, or at least that I would say, okay, he was rightly treated as a mid-carder. I think putting the Intercontinental Championship on him would have been strange. I think because the Intercontinental Championship is for athletes, not characters. And while Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, is an amazing athlete, it's not That's not what's in the forefront of his matches. The forefront of his matches are character. It's not like Finn Balor when he plays the Demon, and it's a great character, but still we're more looking at the athleticism. The character of The Undertaker dominated whatever match he was in, so I don't think putting the Intercontinental Championship on him would have done him or the title any favors, if that makes sense. WWE's logic behind rushing CM Punk's 2011 return was due to SummerSlam that year's needing a main event, according to Punk himself. If they had kept CM Punk off television, what would the main event have been? Would it have included any of the following? Well, the main event of SummerSlam that year, if I recall, was John Cena versus CM Punk with Alberto Del Rio cashing in. So when you say John Cena, Triple H, Alberto Del Rio, Kevin Nash, etc., I think you could have gotten something out of Del Rio versus Triple H, although they were both heels. They were like, Triple H brought Alberto Del Rio down to do the cash-in. But I mean, if there was something else about that, if Alberto Del Rio had done the cash-in ahead of time, turned babyface, and then, you know, sort of taken on Triple H, I think Triple H and Del Rio could have done something really cool. The only thing I will say about Alberto Del Rio, the only reason I will say it's sort of unfortunate that we don't have him now, is I would love to see Alberto Del Rio versus Andrade Cien Almas. I think that would be a fucking amazing match. But no, that one match isn't enough to bring him back to the show, obviously. If Damien Sandow had successfully cashed in his Money in the Bank contract on John Cena for the World Heavyweight title in 2003, what would his title reign have looked like? How long would it have been? Who would he have dropped it to, etc.? If he had cashed in, like the way WWE thought of Damien Sandow, if he had cashed in and won on John Cena would have won it back at the next pay-per-view. That's unfortunately. Would you still unify the belts originally occurring December that year, or hold it off till a later date? Damien Sandow was not somebody that they would put in a big situation like that. I could have seen them giving him a decent run with the title, which they did. I don't think something that they see as historic as mending the two belts. I don't think Alberto Del Rio being in that scenario would have happened. Any predictions for the Hall of Fame 2019 class? I hate to say this because I'm only really saying it because he just passed away. Jim Neidhart. Obviously, the two standard bearers still out there are Chyna and Owen Hart. WWE has to get up off their ass and recognize Chyna. And Martha Hart needs to get up off her ass and let the Hall of Fame have Owen. I think you can make a case for, on the lower part of the card, putting in Too Cool. I think that would be really nice, especially with the passing of Brian Christopher. I think you could have Rikishi induct them and have Scott Taylor accept the induction for both of them. It would seem a little reflexive just because he just passed away, but I mean, they were an entertaining tag team at the time. Rikishi had the tie-in with them. I mean, you could induct the three of them. You could induct the three of them as a trio, or you could induct just Too Cool. But it wouldn't hurt my feelings if they were in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there are people in the Hall of Fame already that don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. So I don't know. You can't really say who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because there's so many people there, in my opinion, that don't. But on the other side of that coin, there's idiots out there that think Hulk Hogan shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. So, I've noticed replaying some old Raw and SmackDown video games that the commentators are pretty protective of their respective brands and always hyped up their own roster members and mocked those from the other show. Is this something you'd like to see more in today's product, or is it a more competitive vibe, or at least a more competitive vibe between each show? I think they need to be. I think that the way they do it right now, people mock it because they come around to Survivor Series, and Survivor Series is the old bragging rights concept, and I think unless they are competing with each other, they've got no reason to be competitive with each other. I mean, they're really they're two separate things. They're supposed to be presented as two separate brands. So you know, if they can tip their hat to each other for the rest of the year, and then, you know, kind of like two friends fighting, it's like, okay, we see your accomplishments, we see your accomplishments, but if you're going to try and accomplish something against us, we're going to give you a fight. I think the fact that the competition ramps up when they know they're actually going to fight each other, that makes the most sense out of anything. They have no reason to stick it at each other the rest of the year because they sell Survivor Series as the only time these brands are going to fight. So if they maintain that competition throughout the whole year, then as we head towards Survivor Series, it doesn't feel special. It doesn't feel like we're ramping up to something. It just feels like everyday shtick, if that makes sense. I know a lot of people disagree with me. I know they should be constantly trying to dig at each other. So, but in that case, how come NXT isn't throwing shade on Raw and SmackDown on a regular basis? That's my question to you guys. Do you think WCW would have won the war or at least survived longer than 2001 if Triple H and Shawn Michaels had left WCW instead of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash? I think WCW would have had a shot if Shawn Michaels and Triple H left with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. But again, I don't... As much as I respect those guys and as much as they are really, really big names in the company, I'm really hesitant to say that any one person could have swayed the entire war. Because as much as you want to say somebody like a Seth Rollins or a Daniel Bryan or an AJ Styles are the reason we watch wrestling, everybody has a different reason why they watch wrestling. Because as much as if Shawn Michaels had left, and Triple H had left, and Scott Hall had left, and Kevin Nash had left, somebody else would have taken that top spot. Somebody else would have taken that top spot and run with it, and whoever that is has some fans, and those fans of that one person would have been overhyped. And I'm sorry, WWE can put in all the money in advertising that they want. Their best advertising is their fans. They don't get that, clearly, by some of the choices we've gotten recently, but their best advertising is their fans. So that new guy who's a fan of a guy who's in the mid-card is going to get extra hyped when that guy becomes the main event guy because Shawn Michaels and Triple H left. He becomes more hyped. He infects the people around him with the enthusiasm, and we move forward. I don't think it would have prolonged the Monday Night Wars at all, because there was creative shit in the back that wasn't working. There was, too many cooks in the kitchen, inmates running the asylum, whatever you want to say. There, like, structurally, from what I've heard, WCW was bad. So, you can put as many bricks on a building as you want. If the foundation isn't there, it's still going to crumble, and in fact, it may have crumbled faster. It would have seemed like TNA. Remember when TNA had that era where Hulk Hogan came in and they squared up the ring and they brought in every old WCW, ECW, NWO, WWE guy that they could find, and it was just like you're just compounding the problem and compounding the problem and compounding the problem. I think if anything, it might have ended them sooner. How's that for a hot take? If Sheamus retired tomorrow, is he worthy of a Hall of Fame induction? Again, you get the worthy thing in there. He's been part of a lot of different things. Sheamus and Cesaro right now, the Bar, is probably one of the most underrated teams on the roster. They've had some success, but right now they're in the back eating catering, which is really fucking sad. He was part, take it or leave it, of the League of Nations. He was part of the failed ECW project, but he has... he's won Money in the Bank, he's been King of the Ring, he's been champion, he's been tag team champion, he's fought Triple H at WrestleMania. There's enough there to do a Hall of Fame induction. People are in the Hall, as I said before, people are in the Hall of Fame with less, so the whole deserve factor really, really becomes a problem for me to try and quantify. What do you think? What are your thoughts on WrestleMania 26? Undertaker defeating Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart defeating Vince McMahon, John Cena defeating Batista, and Chris Jericho defeating Edge. I remember coming out of WrestleMania 26 thinking that there was a lot of Canadian content. You had Chris Jericho versus Edge for the world title, plus you had, Bret Hart, who's the Canadian representative apparently, taking on Vince McMahon. Bret Hart and Vince McMahon was as ridiculous as we wanted it to be. Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels was good, but not as good as 25. I'm sorry. I know 25, 26, 27 lead us into 28, where we get to that end of the era match, which is great. So it served as a cog in the wheel. It wasn't the better of the two matches, in my opinion. John Cena versus Batista is John Cena versus Batista. And Chris Jericho and Edge, while I like both of them, they've both had better matches. They've both had better matches with each other. So, decent enough card. There's nothing bad about it. There's just none of those things that you mentioned to me, with due respect to all those guys. Nothing sticks out as best WrestleMania of all time. Do you think there's room in the current WWE pay-per-view schedule for Money in the Bank and King of the Ring? If so, which months should they take place? I've always said, bring back King of the Ring, make it a month or so before SummerSlam, and treat it like the second half of the year Royal Rumble. Winner of the King of the Ring gets a shot at the one of the world champions at SummerSlam. Now, what you can do is do the same as you do with the Royal Rumble, what they did with the Royal Rumble this year. Winner of the King of the Ring gets to face whatever champion they want. But I don't know. It is what it is. I would love to see it back, but I think WWE, and it's kind of a cool move on their part, they're keeping the tournaments specifically as a way to introduce new talent, as a way to outreach to some new and different indie talent, with, like I say, with the Mae Young Classic, the CWC, the UK tournament, etc. I mean, the UK tournament is about to turn into its own brand. The CWC tournament spawned off 205 Live, which, I mean, you can call that a success or not. The women's, I really hope the Mae Young Classic doesn't take us to an all-women's show, because I don't think that helps the division at all. What's going on here now? What was the worst SummerSlam booking decision? Alberto Del Rio defeating CM Punk with the Money in the Bank cash-in, or Team Cena defeating Team Nexus? Everybody points at the Cena Nexus thing, because Cena buried the Nexus before it even starts, and that's kind of a good thing. Alberto Del Rio defeating CM Punk with the Money in the Bank cash-in is just, it's how the Money in the Bank works. You got two great guys there. Alberto Del Rio cashes in on CM Punk. All I think of that is later on down the line, we're going to see Alberto Del Rio versus CM Punk, which isn't any kind of bad thing. Alberto Del Rio, Team Cena defeating Team Nexus is just a way of solidifying, okay, here's these new guys that we got, and they're jobbers. Cena dubs it so. So I'm going to say the Team Cena versus Nexus thing. Are there any matches in SummerSlam's history that you think should have been saved for particular WrestleMania? I mean, last night we got Miz versus Daniel Bryan. That should be a WrestleMania thing. But then again, it still could be a WrestleMania thing as long as Daniel Bryan doesn't jump ship and go to Jobbermania, aka All In. Thoughts on Dave Meltzer? I don't really follow a lot of Dave Meltzer. I don't listen to his podcast. I don't read a lot of his dirt sheet stuff. I will say the Peyton Royce thing is interesting. Now, I have to be very clear on this. I really do, because people on Twitter like to misinterpret what I'm saying. I do not agree in any way, shape, or form that his comments about Peyton Royce are right or valid or anything like that. But what I will say is, for the purpose of impact, the people that were trying to, like, bury him did recontextualize what he said a whole lot. Now, that being said, I am a little envious of Dave Meltzer in the amount of fucks he does not give about the social justice warriors on Twitter. The apology that he put out, dripping in sarcasm, was one of the funniest things I've seen since, what I mentioned before, Shawn Michaels overselling for Hulk Hogan because he didn't want to be there. So I gotta tip my hat to Meltzer for basically giving a very passive-aggressive fuck you to the protesters on Twitter. But no, I don't agree with what he said about Peyton Royce at all. Which WrestleMania booking is a travesty, is more unforgivable? Undertaker and Sting being on the same card and not wrestling each other at WrestleMania 31, or Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan being on the same card and not wrestling each other at WrestleMania 8? You say travesty. I'm not really upset about either. I mean, Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan have fought each other in other places. They fought each other in TNA. Undertaker and Sting, should they have done it? Probably. For the fans that really want to see it, probably. Personally, for the reasons I've already mentioned, I'm glad they didn't. So I really wouldn't call either of them a tragedy. Randy Orton. Sorry. Bonus question, if this takes place after SummerSlam 2018. Rank these in terms of biggest falls from grace on the 2018 card. Randy Orton main evented in 2016 but wasn't even booked on SummerSlam 2018 2 years later. Jinder Mahal, WWE title match at SummerSlam 2017 and wasn't even booked at all in 2018. Or Rusev, WWE title match at Extreme Rules last month, booked on the SummerSlam pre-show. I won't say Rusev. because I like what they did with Rusev. I'm sorry, Rusev getting a title shot at Extreme Rules was cool. Rusev AJ Styles is not a Big Four match. Sorry, get at me in the comment sections if you want. But it's just not. And especially when the alternative was Samoa Joe. Sorry. But also, I really did like what they did with Rusev and Almas and Vega and Lana. Low-key, we got the pay-per-view debut of Zelina Vega, which is cool. Rusev and Almas are great. Lana is what it is. I mean, let's be real, but she held her own for what she had to do, so I wouldn't call that a fall from grace. Jinder Mahal, the way they have him right now, sort of as the comedy, he's meditating in the Shanti thing. Where would you have put him on the card? It's all a matter of where you put him on the card. And Randy Orton, I'm not going to feel bad for at all. He's had his moments, and he's got the weird, creepy, like, I'm going to stalk Jeff Hardy thing going on. But I don't know what they're going to do with him right now, considering more allegations against more wrestlers have come out, because it's 2018. It is the age of, let's make up a story that happened 10 years ago that nobody can prove because we want to shade somebody. You know, supposedly he's walking around a locker room grabbing his dick at the writers, which just sounds ridiculous. So they're gonna probably keep him on the back burner for a while, and that's fine. But I wouldn't call it a travesty. Jinder Mahal shouldn't be on there, and Rusev was used relatively well. Do I wish it was on the main card? Yes. If we hadn't gotten, and this is really getting into me reviewing last night's SummerSlam now, but if we hadn't gotten Balor as the Demon last night, I would have said, put the mixed tag on the main card and move Corbin Balor to the pre-show. Because we got the Demon, I can't really say that. But I don't think there's any real falls from grace here. There's just like wrestling careers go like this, right? If you stay at the top all the time, you get Roman Reigns syndrome and everybody gets sick of you. Look at somebody like a Seth Rollins who's sort of dipped and flowed and people love him right now. And he gets to be the guy in the ring while the guy in his corner is coming back from 9 months of rehab. You know, shout out to Dean Ambrose. I'm sure he's going to do something shortly. I don't think any of these are particularly a fall from grace. I think they're just representative of where all these characters are in their respective moments. Almas should have a title soon. And he's not one of the ones you mentioned, but I will say Almas should have a title soon. Thank you for all those questions, Zohan, and all of your extra details and contextual hints. It's much appreciated. Snakebit Goat says, is Lacey Evans championship material on any roster? If they change her gimmick pisses me off. The whole, like, it's so SJW, it drives me fucking crazy. The whole, like, I don't know whether I'm a pinup girl or whether I'm trying to look strong for like a military gimmick, or if I'm just lost in time, or if I'm a feminist because my finisher is the women's right. I don't doubt that she could show us better things in the ring, but her gimmick is shit. So as she is right now, no. Is there such thing as main roster proof when it comes to NXT talent? Seth Rollins is an easy answer to that. Kevin Owens, Samoa Joe. You can't ruin these guys. You can put them in the dumbest situations imaginable. You know, you have Kevin Owens in the whole, like, Jericho, List of Jericho, you know, Festival of Friendship bullshit. Didn't take away anybody's fandom of him. Samoa Joe, they can keep him off TV forever, and then you can just say, hey, he's fighting at SummerSlam, and people will watch. Rollins, your first ever NXT champion, who won it from Jinder Mahal in a good match, if you remember back that far. People love him. When he's succeeding, people are with him. When he's not succeeding, people want him to succeed. He's top roster proof. Now, when you say main roster proof, I'm sure you're talking about people like the Ascension and the Authors of Pain and Asuka and whatever. Ascension is still on TV every week. They're in comedy gimmicks, which is fucking ridiculous, but they're still there. Authors of Pain just got there, and what people from NXT, people like fans of NXT need to realize is people don't watch NXT. If you bring up these NXT people and sort of give the world to them on day one, to those of them who haven't been watching NXT, it feels out of place. Like, it would be like, I don't even know, somebody from the indies who's sort of a mid-carder. If they came to NXT and that night, on their opening night, got handed the NXT title from friggin' Tommaso Ciampa instead of Johnny Gargano, who you've been following for a while, and there's a story there existing that they deserve, and as an NXT fan, you'd be pissed off. Now, the main roster, you could say the same thing. The main roster casual fans don't watch NXT. Why would this guy that I know nothing about have all this immediate success? You can do that a couple times here and there. You can have it that, you know, Authors of Pain go through, they destroy a bunch of people, they immediately become champions. Cool. Now where do they go? You could have somebody like Drew McIntyre, who's fucking phenomenal. Don't get me wrong. But you bring in Drew McIntyre, he takes out the world champion with a boot. That's how he makes his debut. The next pay-per-view, he's the world champion. What do you do with him now? Where does he go? What else does he have to aspire to? What else does he have to work towards if he's the champion on day one? You don't have to be main roster proof. You have to prove yourself on the main roster. How's that for a tagline? Heavy Machinery, awesome or dumb? Heavy Machinery are not dumb. They come out and they play really fun, excitable, happy characters. But if you were that much bigger than everybody else and you found it so easy to throw everybody else around, wouldn't you be cocky? And that's why I'm surprised that Authors of Pain aren't more cocky. That's why I'm surprised that, you know, Big Show back in the day or Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman is a little bit, because he basically laughs at what he's able to do. I mean, Lars Sullivan is the same. I'm surprised Lars Sullivan doesn't come out and cut a promo and be like, okay, who am I throwing around tonight? Heavy Machinery are there to have a good time. They're having a good time with the crowd. They have that same connection with the crowd that the Street Profits have. The Street Profits are just fun, and you can tell they're having fun in the ring. You can tell they're having fun with the fans. And I think Heavy Machinery is equal and opposite to that. And I think it's really, really good. Are there some gimmicks that they do that are dumb? Yes, but even those dumb gimmicks, like the stakes and weights thing, is dumb, but it's a dumb that works. It's a corny that works, and that can be fine. Like I said before about the Santino and Kozlov thing, you can have comedy in wrestling. You can have people out there doing dumb stuff. It doesn't make them dumb. I enjoy them quite a bit. I wouldn't mind them being champions, to be perfectly honest with you. Is Kona Reeves a hack, or is it too early to tell? Right now, I think they're pushing his gimmicks so hard because they want people to call him a hack. Obviously, early days Hollywood Rock is what they're going for. But I think they're pushing it so obviously that they want people to think that. They want people to hate him. They want people to call him a hack so that he can go out there with a I've got something to prove mentality. I mean, when I do NXT reviews, I call him, you know, Kona, don't call me the Rock Reeves. But that's what they're booking towards. That's what they want, so that he goes in there with a chip on his shoulder with something to prove that we've given him. And I think, yes, he's a hack, but he's, again, like Heavy Machinery's dumb in the right way, he's a hack in the right way. It's really, really good. How do you celebrate Rusev Day? I have to pace myself because every day is Rusev Day. Favorite Southpaw regional wrestling worker? I'm not going to lie to you guys. I haven't seen a single episode of Southpaw. I know somebody suggested it in the last Q&A too, and I said I was going to give it a shot. I haven't. I fail at life. Anyways, thank you Snakebit Goat for that. Mizark10, I have questions for a change. Okay. This is with a big exclamation mark and everything, so he's very excited about asking questions. Cool! This is the kind of guy that's going to keep the Q&As going. Please note, this is coming after your big MCU review. If you guys haven't seen, or if you're new to the channel, go back in the channel. Myself and Black Cat Feline did an entirely immersive MCU review, reviewing every movie from Iron Man to Infinity War. Infinity War just came out on Blu-ray this week, and I watched it last night. It's still fucking great. Go check that out. It was a lot of fun. It's about 3 hours long because we're reviewing 19 movies, but it is a lot of fun. Since you only shortly touched on the Marvel Netflix shows, how would you rank them? For me, I'm really only into Jessica Jones and Daredevil, and Defenders would be third. Sorry guys, my camera's doing a thing again. I'll be back. And we're back for a third time to recap the last question I was answering. Since you've only sort of touched on the Marvel Netflix shows, how would you rank them? For me, I guess I'm really into Jessica Jones and Daredevil. Jessica Jones probably #1, Daredevil #2, as I still wanted the actress mentioned above to comment on the Jessica Jones Kristen Ritter character. I wouldn't change a thing. Defenders would be third. I haven't seen Luke Cage, and I haven't seen any Iron Fist. It's interesting because sort of the Marvel Netflix universe, I've always made what's the word I'm looking for? I've always made the statement that Marvel and Netflix are fucking, and it's wonderful. it's a mini Avengers, isn't it? Because you had all all the original shows, all the individual shows, and then they came together to be the Defenders, just like the Avengers came together to be the Avengers. If I was to rank them, though, I think Punisher and Jessica Jones are tied for 1. The Defenders, the group up show, the Defenders, would be number 2. Daredevil would be last. Luke Cage and Iron Fist would be tied for number 3. Just because I know the two of them are gonna team up and probably have their own show as well. Daredevil is just, it's funny because they're all comic book characters, but Daredevil is the only one that I look at as being a little too comic book-y, and I know that's a really retarded thing to say because it's a Marvel show, but everything else sort of makes sense. I think anybody that is a fan of The Walking Dead specifically and remembers the Shane character, John Bernthal as the Punisher is probably the most brilliant casting decision Marvel has made since Robert Downey Jr. being Iron Man. I think he owns that like deep, dark, disturbed, but still trying to make the world a better place character really, really great. Jessica Jones, partially because she reminds me of the friend that I have that made me go and watch it. Is really, really good. Daredevil's just there. I have a little bit of a defense of Iron Fist because so many people hate it, and I don't think it's as it's sort of the Alexa Bliss of Marvel Netflix shows, where I'm not going to tell you that it's super great, but it's not as bad as you think it is. Go and watch it again. Season 2 is coming soon. That's going to be good as well. Also, while we're on the topic of Netflix shows, are there any other Netflix shows such as Glow or American Vandal that you watch? I highly recommend both, even if you haven't seen it, and not just because my cousin is one of the executive producers on American Vandal. All right, good for you. You've got a foot in the door in law. Good for you. What else do I watch on Netflix that's not Marvel? Watch Orange is the New Black, even though I haven't seen the new season yet. I haven't even touched the new season yet. Scandal, I will say. I never saw Scandal when it was a thing on TV, but I did blitz through Scandal on Netflix. Anybody who likes any of the Shonda Rhimes shows knows that Scandal is pretty rough. And House of Cards is another one that I watch, even though it's going to be, with what's happened with Kevin Spacey, it'll be interesting because apparently the entire last season is going to switch focus to his wife, which is, I don't know. It's one of those things. As far as other stuff, I don't think there's anything else. As soon as I turn off my camera, I'm going to go back to my playlist and I'm going to pull up 3 or 4 other things that I watch that are specifically Netflix shows. But I don't know. There's stuff that people have told me to watch. Like Stranger Things and with Altered Carbon and some other things like that, which I haven't gotten around to yet. So you gotta remember, guys, when I'm watching TV, when I'm talking about TV shows that I watch, keep in mind there's a bunch that I watch, and then there's a bunch in the back of my head that I'm like, I'll watch when I have time. I just started watching Game of Thrones like a month ago. So that'll give you an idea how behind I was on certain things. It was either Game of Thrones or Lucifer, and I couldn't get my hands on Lucifer. So that's a very, very odd way for me to end the Q&A. Thank you, Ms. Arc10. Ms. Arc10, watch on Wednesday. Watch the NXT show when I talk about the pay-per-view pick 'em, because you sir will like it. That's it for the Q&A. Didn't really imagine that I was going to be ending on Marvel and Netflix stuff, but that's just how it goes sometimes. I've been Spaz, your YWC Reality Check. Stop there, talk down there, start a conversation. Keep all these conversations going. Don't be a stranger. I will talk to each and every last one of you later, but for right now, I am tagging out. Bye, guys.
You're a freak like me.